and how potentially that we, or I did in my case, overcomplicate the step 4 process. It's easy to think about what we're doing with the step 4 inventory, but then also run it through the steps in your head without actually processing it in the first place. At this stage we're talking about step 4. We discuss our inventory with our sponsor or sharing partner in step 5. Then anything that needs to be processed within the inventory is then further down the line in steps 8 and 9. So all at this stage, all the book is asking us to do is to use the fearless moral inventory. I think it's more fearful of a concept in trying to work out what you're supposed to do. So I'm hoping what this video presentation does is put you at ease, or perhaps help understand the basic principles in what we're needing to do at this stage, and hopefully it will be useful for the session 2, where we at length discuss the inventory process without getting you confused. Now I'm just going to refer quickly back to page 65 of the big book. As you can see here, a little bit of confusion can come across with the fullness of this information that's on page 65. This is here to give you some clarity as to what we're working towards. So we can see that he is resentful against Mr. Brown. He's discussed this with another person, and we can see the cause of that from that discussion, and then how these things have affected him in terms of fear, predominantly all the way through. These are laid out to show you what the end result can be like, but as we discussed from the AA Grapevine back in 1944, and the processes involved in the book study workshop, this is the layout that was used, and so I'm going to run on this one quickly to give you some basic concepts of what we need to do. I also at the end of this will show you a more 21st century version, which is just basically a spreadsheet that highlights in tabs the separate different causes that we suffer from in separate tabs, and we discuss that later. Anyway, so let's go back. We'll use Mr. Brown, poor Mr. Brown. We'll use him as an example. The only thing that from the one on the information in the presentation is that I've, at that time, I guess they just didn't add in lines because it was something they didn't do, but to make sure that we clearly separate each different issue, I've just put down in columns. So say like for resentment, as in there on the page 65, Mr. Brown. I also then feel fear from him and jealousy. That's it. That's all we're asking you to do at that stage, and the same can go along. Okay, this is supposed to be an intro into your processes of doing an inventory further down the line. It can be as complex as you want down the line, but at this particular moment in the workings of the steps, we want you to get used to the process of being honest and getting things down on paper, so that when we move on to step 5, we can then discuss this with a closed mouth person of your choice, and then we can work on then going further with then talking with this through and praying on them to the God of your understanding. But at this point, as I think I've probably said too many times, at this point we're just asking you to fill in the information. This is probably why it comes across as saying fearless, because it is literally just putting stuff down. For me personally, a lot of the stuff felt really not important as soon as I put it down on paper. As soon as I got it out of my head and onto this, things changed already. Right. So this is the moral inventory, as we said, as we discussed. It'll be referring back to the information on 65 and onwards to 77. Right, so I've flicked over to, this is a great one if you're working with a sharing partner or a sponsor who isn't readily available to see you face to face. I've done this quite a few times with sponsees, and it was also a process that I did myself when I went through the step 4 process. It is basically, we've got the separate tabs. Let's start with resentment. Again, it's just very similar to the moral inventory example of back in 1944. We've got the resentment, so we're in resentments. Mr. Brown again. Now, if you're very specific into your reasons, there's absolutely no problem at this time into writing why. Most people who have a resentment do specifically know what the problem is. This enables us to write this down here. At this point, we can then just literally put X's when we're talking with our sponsor or sharing partner, what the problem is causing. Who's to blame? Well, again, this is something we can discuss when you're discussing it with your partner. And then the exact nature of our wrongs. What was our part in this? Again, this is all further down the line. We just start off with this for our step 4. Just a quick flick back before I finish on the moral inventory of the traditional style. The reason why we've got our assets on the right hand side, i.e. forgiveness, humility, they're usually, well, they all offer an alternative to what the negative is doing to us. So if we had a list of people here that we're resentful against, our objective is to be forgiveness, feel forgiveness for those people. Yep, I'm afraid so. Envy against somebody. We want to be content in ourselves. So these assets are there to give you an objective in terms of how you want to feel out of things and how you will feel after following the steps. Anyway, I hope that's of use. I will post this into the WhatsApp group chat. I will then also give you a copy of this style and the newer spreadsheet version.